Welcome to In the Trenches with Tanner Kern and Maxx Forde. We're back for another season, different platform now, and excited to be back talking about the offensive line and defensive line in the NFL and breaking down our favorite props and fantasy mismatches every single week. Max, how you doing?
Doing well. It feels like it's been a while. It's good to be back, though. Feels right at home. Getting season 2 of this started.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a long off season. We're back into it. Obviously, missed week 1, heading into week 2. What's some things that you saw in week 1 that surprised you? It doesn't have to be offensive and defensive line, just be teams or whatever your thoughts were.
Man, like the Carolina Panthers, I know they weren't good last year. Obviously, earned the number 1 pick, didn't have it. But I really thought that Canales would get them going a little bit over there. I know he's been kind of talked about as a quarterback whisperer. Thought maybe get Bryce Young back on the right track. I'm not saying that I necessarily thought they would win last week, but I thought they'd be competitive, and they were not that. They did not look like an NFL football team last week, which was a little bit surprising. I know it's the same as what they were last year, but I expected a step up this year. So I know they spent a lot of money on the offensive line. We'll talk about offensive line, not theirs, but Robert Hunt. They got some guys, man. It just did not look good.
No, and speaking of Dave Canales, my thought from the beginning of the season is how good the Buccaneers looked without him as the offensive coordinator. Yep. I mean, he was great as the OC there, but the Buccaneers looked really good offensively. They made a lot of adjustments. They added some guys up front. They gained experience and depth. Baker looks really good. Mike Evans looks great. So I'm excited about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year for sure. So that would be my biggest takeaway. And then the Chiefs. The Chiefs find a way to win consistently. We saw that. Real quick, Max, too, looking at the Bengals. What'd you see from them? They look like they couldn't block anyone up front. They look like they didn't know how to keep a quarterback in the pocket. What'd you see in that game?
Man, and I know you asked about the Bengals, but I'm kind of going to flip it a little bit, and I'm going to go to the Patriots. That defense just looks lights out, and I know we'll get a chance to talk about them a little bit later on, but they don't have that like headline guy. They don't have that Maxx Crosby, that T.J. Watt. A guy like that's really going to be that A-list kind of guy that's going to contend for Defensive Player of the Year, but they've just got a defense that they play well together. They're sound. They come play fast, hit hard, and just threw Cincinnati off their game. Obviously, they got a lot of in-house drama with the Jamar Chase contract and T. Higgins on his last year of his deal, or on the franchise tag, I guess. So there's a lot of things going on there that, I don't know. It seems like between the opponent and what's going on in-house, just last week was brutal for them.
Definitely. So we got a few people watching live right now on YouTube, surprisingly, because we didn't announce this was going on there. But we're going to be on there every single week, guys. So make sure you drop your questions. We're talking props, picks, all that stuff, focusing around the offensive and defensive line. But if you have a running back prop or receiver prop, let us know, and we'll do our best to answer that. So the way the show works, basically, we give our biggest mismatch of the week from a defensive line perspective, and then we talk about some really good value plays when it comes to DFS for defenses, and then going to give some props along the way too, Max. So we'll start with the Chargers defensive line going against the Carolina Panthers offensive line. The Chargers have some studs up front. We know that. The Panthers just really did not look good in week 1. I don't think they get much better here. I think when it comes to the Chargers defensive and offensive line, honestly, they're going to dominate this game. But really like Joey Bosa, he is questionable in this one. And then from an offensive line perspective, going against the Panthers, love Rashawn Slater and love Joe Alt. So I think LA is going to have a ton of success in this game on both sides of the ball. But looking specifically at that Chargers defensive line, what do you think they're going to come out and do to the Panthers?
Well, you mentioned Joey Bosa there, questionable, but him and Khalil Mack, obviously guys that have been doing it for a long time, a little bit long in the tooth, but they're still productive. The Panthers, a lot of their spend that we talked about during the offseason on the offensive line was on the interior. So those are guys that maybe Mack and Bosa couldn't avoid. So I just think that they're going to be able to get to Bryce early and often, shut it down. And like you said, with their offensive line, I think they should be able to get a lead, and the Panthers aren't going to be able to try to run the ball. Like, they haven't been able to run the ball, but they're not going to be able to try to get the game script to do it. So talking about their offensive line too, Joe Alt looked great against Maxx Crosby this last week. Looks like they hit a home run there. So I just think that this game sets up. It's going to be a long day for Bryce Young there. So.
Yeah, and he's proven he can't handle the pressure. And looking at the Carolina Panthers offensive line, I'm a big Ike Ekwonu guy. I think he's been really solid. I mean, obviously the 1 first-round draft pick on this offensive line, but I think it comes down to the Panthers. They have a problem developing players. They have a problem bringing players in and finding a way to get them better, just because they got 3 second-round picks on their offensive line. They get a 3rd-round pick and a 1st-round pick, and they look like they can't block anyone. And when you combine that with a short quarterback, it's a recipe for disaster. So, looking at Bryce Young coming into this game from a passing prop perspective, his line is set at 185.5. We don't see totals this low often for quarterbacks. You still going to lean under on it, or would you take the over?
Man, you just from a volume side of things, you want to take the over, but I think I'm going to have to take the under after what happened last week. They didn't look like a professional football team. I hate saying that because those guys are doing a job. They're getting paid to do it, and I know they're working hard, but it just didn't come together last week. And might be a failure of my imagination, but I just don't see it coming together for them this week.
Yeah. So, Max, knowing, being a former CFL defensive lineman, when you were in a situation where you're going against an offensive line, you're watching film, they look terrible one week, are you expecting them to bounce back, or are you going into the game saying, hey, we're going to get the same old that we saw on film?
You expect them to come out more focused. I'm not going to sit here and say that you expect them to be different players, because at a certain level, you are the player that you are. You have certain talents. You might get a little bit better here and there. You might focus on something during practice that makes you a little bit better, but week to week, you're not going to be like from here all the way up here kind of a thing. And so I do think when you get your butt whipped in a game, that week of practice is normally a tough one, a little bit of a come to Jesus moment. And I don't know, the offensive line coaches I know can get on those boys now. I know you know that just as well as anybody. So, I think that they'll probably come out more focused, but if you look at the film, the things that I normally was looking for is like where they carry their hands. Are they high hands guy or low hands guy? Are they guys that like to punch, or do they like to rap? Can you get any keys on their stance on what if it's a run or a pass? Like those kinds of things aren't the things that are going to change. So if you see things that you can exploit from the last game, I think that those carry over. Those guys might come in a little bit more focused, which might impact their performance, but we'll see. We'll see on Sunday.
Definitely. And the biggest surprise of this game for me, from a prop perspective, when you're looking at Justin Herbert's passing prop right now, set at 209.5. So you can see how much Jim Harbaugh's philosophy is playing into this passing prop, because he only threw for 144 last week. Looking at Baker against the with the Commanders. Baker played the Commanders, but looking at last week, the Panthers secondary just was not good at all against the New Orleans Saints. I mean, Derek Carr didn't throw for a ton, but he still looked very efficient with the football. So would lean over on Herbert with such a low prop there. Moving into some of our budget plays here, Max, we got a few of them from a DFS perspective. Let me pull some of them up here. So first one, we got the Patriots defensive line versus the Seahawks offensive line. You're getting the Patriots defense right now at $2,900 on DFS. I was shocked how well the Patriots played up front, especially losing their leader, Matthew Judon. They snapped right out of it and were fantastic, dominated a decent offensive line in the Cincinnati Bengals. They have some very good players on that group. The Seahawks offensive line here in a position to struggle on the road. Why do you like this play?
Yeah, we just saw them do it, and we talked about it a little bit earlier. That front they play really well together. They don't have that. They don't have a Matthew Judon, if you will. But Keon White looks really good. They've got Dietrich Wise in there for some veteran support. They've got guys up and down that line that really have bought into what Gerard Mayo has been doing there and bringing that over from the Belichick regime. And you can tell it's there on the field, on the film, and I mean, they just saw Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, maybe limited snaps, and those guys, and they didn't do anything last week. So, and they did it with not a lot of offensive support too. As far as the Patriots' offense isn't a team that looks like they're going to put a ton of points on the board. So it's a defense that's able to get back up, do it again over and over again. And those, for me, those kinds of teams are real fun when you're able to do that. Just your numbers called over and over again, you always answer the call. So it's just one of those teams that I'm sure it's fun to be on that defense. They look like they're vibing right now. I don't want to overreact. It was just week one, but it does look like a very solid defense. They were good last year too, for big stretches of the year. So I just think this is a good matchup, especially at $2,900.
Yeah, and they have a defensive-minded head coach, and obviously Bill Belichick's one of the best defensive minds in the game. But now you're bringing in the players' coach version of that, a guy that knows Bill Belichick's system, learned all the intricacies of it, but he also gets along with players really well. I think that says something, and it showed how much fun the New England Patriots were having last week. So I think this is a very good play here. I am a little scared of the bounce back, though, like for Seattle coming into this game, the Patriots, huge win on the road against the Bengals. It's probably not going to get much better than that this season. They're not going to contend for a playoff spot just because their offense. So I'm a little concerned that they do take a back seat coming off that Bengals one. Totally.
Definitely could see that. And there's always going to be that question of when will Drake May start. So I'm looking forward to seeing that too, aside from the line play. So.
Yeah, definitely. Looking forward to seeing Drake May get there, and maybe even Joe Millen at some point this season, who's very fun to watch.
Yeah, got a bazooka.
Yeah, got a bazooka. He's got one of the biggest arms in the NFL, I bet. So moving into our next play here, we got the Giants defensive line going against the Commanders offensive line. You're getting the New York Giants priced right now at $2,700. Max, looking at this, for me, this is a very big risk play because what the Washington Commanders can do offensively. They can't really throw the ball, which is a big plus, or at least we didn't see them throw the ball a lot with Jaden Daniels. But Daniels is like a gazelle out there. He's just a glider. He can fly. They run QB power with him, which is absolutely stupid. I don't understand why they were doing that last week against the Buccaneers, up 20 points or down 10, 14 points. But looking at this game here right now, the Giants defensive line and front seven have some dogs on it. Kevon Thibodeau, Bobby Okereke, Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, just to name a few. But this team's not very good. I think the defense is going to be in some trouble positions. So why do you like this play?
I will say I agree it's a risk play. It's one of those you're trying to spend down. Like we're talking about budget plays here, so all these you're trying to spend down. If it's going to be any good for the Giants at all this year, I think this is a spot. You do have Jaden Daniels, who he looked good running the ball, and if he maybe puts a little bit more touch on some of those passes, they had a big day passing too, and so there's risk there. It's absolutely there. That could be an explosive offense, but if we're looking into the trenches, I think the defensive line is probably the Giants' best unit as a whole, and the offensive line of the Commanders isn't their strongest unit. It's not their strong suit. It's probably their weakest unit on their offense, and so I think this is an opportunity for Dexter Lawrence and those guys to get in there, try to cause some havoc. And if it doesn't happen this week, I'm probably staying away from the Giants the rest of the year. But I think this is the one spot that I think you can try to spend down and play the Giants. It's scary, especially, again, what happened on offense to them last week. They didn't put up any points, and they gave up points. So, it's a scary spot. But if we're trying to spend down, I think it's one that you can try to pick here.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It's just I'm afraid what Daniel Jones is going to do, putting the defense in bad situations. I mean, he's already getting booed out of the stadium. So a few picks there, a few bad plays, that puts his defense in a position to give up points. And, it doesn't matter where they give up the points from. I mean, obviously, if it's an explosive touchdown, you're losing more points, but if they're scoring points, it's still going to go against your defense. So that would be my one fear here. A sneaky play that I like that I think you've done a great job here with this. Titans defensive line versus the Jets offensive line for $2,700. The Titans defense was really good last week against the Bears. The Bears have some studs. I mean, they held they held them to Caleb Williams was under 100 yards. DeAndre Swift, I believe, had 33 yards running the football. So they looked really good. The Jets offensive line, we know it's shaky. They can't protect Rodgers. Do you think this New York Jets team, before we talk about this play, is going to find a way to turn it around this season, compete for an AFC title and be in a good spot?
I think they'll turn it around. Competing for an AFC title is tough because the AFC is just such a tough conference. There's a lot of good teams. You got, of course, Kansas City, but you got Baltimore. You've got, if Cincinnati turns it around, then maybe, but if they look like they did last week, obviously not. But you just got a lot of teams up and down the conference that can play. You got Buffalo Bills. Sorry to the Bills Mafia. I didn't get you there on the first pass, but I mean, they're a good team. Miami. There's just so many teams in the AFC. And so I'm not necessarily going to say that they'll compete for the AFC title game. I know that's where they're going to be. That's their goal. But I do think they can turn it around. They played a really tough opponent in San Francisco last week, and that's one of the better defenses in the league and probably the best defensive front in the league. So I think there's better days ahead for the Jets. I think the offensive line is probably better than what they showed last week. They brought in some guys like Tyron Smith, and I think that they're gonna have better games. But this matchup against the Titans that we're gonna get into here, I think is gonna be another tough one for the second week in a row.
Yeah, I mean, Titans have some great players up front, but if you think the New York Jets offensive line was better than what they showed last week and they went against the great front 49ers, why would you take them here? So for me, the Titans front, you got Jeffrey Simmons, who's been one of the better defensive tackles in the entire league for a while, and you bring in Tavondre Sweat. I mean, he's a 360-pound space eater. You want to try to double Jeffrey Simmons, but when you got a guy that size, you kind of have to double block him, and he can move really well for a guy that size as well. Generate a little bit of pressure. Obviously, not the same as a guy maybe a little bit smaller. He's not as quick, but still, you can't just leave him alone because he is dynamic for a guy that size. And so, having him, I think, unlocks Jeffrey Simmons a lot. Makes this team a really tough team to run the ball on. Then you got guys like Harold Landry on the edge that can really heat up the passer. And so I think this is going to be another tough assignment for the Jets. Maybe not as tough as it was Monday night against the 49ers, but I don't think there's a massive drop-off in terms of the quality of opponent they're facing. I think this is going to be another tough day. So, yeah, I agree with that. Another thing to think about, though, just the quarterback situation with Will Levis putting this defense in bad spots. One thing you got to keep in mind before playing it. Again, that's why you got the $2,700 price tag. I know that factors into it as well. But I do think they're going to have success. The Jets' offensive line is going to struggle, and Aaron Rodgers is going to be under pressure. And we saw with Rodgers, too. He looked a little skittish in the pocket. First game back, obviously, but definitely was not his regular form. So, Max, if you're looking at one matchup here to play, I know most people are submitting multiple DFS lineups, but if you got to pick one out of the three, what are you doing?
Yeah, I think that last one just kind of stands out to me. I will say, like you said, Will Levis could put us in some bad situations with that. But it's just between the line play and then also I think I looked at the stat line at halftime of that Monday night game, and the only players with yards for the Jets were Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. So I think that makes the defensive coordinator's job a little bit easier. I mean, they're still very dynamic players, but if you're not getting contributions from other players on the offense, you can really kind of focus in on those guys. And so I think between them trying to find out who those other playmakers on the offense are and then just that matchup that we're talking about up front, I think that's the one that I'll probably try to dial up as one of the budget plays this week.
Yeah, I think, looking at the price tag here between the Chargers and with Chargers defense against the Panthers for $3,000, I don't feel super comfortable playing the $2,700 price tags here just because I am a little afraid of what Jaden Daniels running football can do. I am a little afraid of what the Jets could dial up here if Aaron Rodgers had some time in the pocket. So I would actually pay up this week, and I would take the Chargers defensive line against the Panthers offensive line. If I had to pick one of the other ones, I'd take a chance on the Pats potentially. We know their defense is good. We know the total in that game is set at like 36.5, 37.5, which is wild. So points are probably not going to be on the board much. So probably would lean towards the Patriots.
Yeah. And the Chargers you said 3,000? I thought we were at 3,400. Either way,
35. I don't know. That's a little higher price to pay. I thought it was 3.
No. That's my bad. My bad. Either way, that's still a really good matchup to play if you can find a way to get it in, because the Chargers should have a very successful day. Yeah. If you're looking for that budget play, though, go with Patriots. Yeah.
But Max, another episode of In the Trenches. We're going to be back here next Thursday, guys. As we start to get more live viewers, we'll probably be doing some more stuff focusing on Thursday Night Football game, getting you guys ready for that. But Max, final thoughts for this week. What are you looking for?
Man, football's back. I know we said it last year too, but football's back, man. It's just fun to kind of go into the weekend, watch all the games. Last week we were in a bar, just had game on every screen. Every single game that was going had it on. And this week I think it's going to be a red zone week. So I'm just excited to get back into the flow of football, man. But I think in terms of what's going on the field, I guess, which is probably more of what you're asking, I'm excited to see if we can bounce back a little bit on offense from a fantasy perspective, because I think I saw a stat something about last week was the fewest passing touchdowns thrown in week 1 since sometime in early 2000s, or maybe since 2000 even. So it's just I'm a defensive guy at heart, but I like seeing my fantasy team score points. So just looking to see if the offense are gonna fight back, or if we're kind of in one of those cyclical motions back to the defense kind of getting the upper hand for a little bit here. So
yeah, I think quarterbacks got to start playing the preseason to help out the offense a little bit, and once that happens, it might improve. But I think first 3 weeks of the season, I think will be a little more slow offensively, and then hopefully speed up. I want to see offense. As an offensive guy, I love seeing teams run the football, like that Lions drive to win the game on Sunday night. That was awesome. That was probably my highlight of the week, just watching that. But it should be a good time. Week 2 is here, guys. We'll be back for week 3 next Thursday night. This was In the Trenches with Tanner Kern and Maxx Forde. Signing off.